Hello there! In the world of economics, there have been some pretty epic debates, but today we're going to talk about one that literally shook the very foundations of the field. It's called the Cambridge Capital Controversy. And believe me, this wasn't just some stuffy academic squabble. It called an entire branch of economic theory into question.
So let's kick this whole thing off with a pretty wild question. What if a fundamental, core law of economics, something the whole theory rests on, was actually built on a major logical flaw? That's the exact question that sparked this entire debate. So let's dive right in.
All right, so this whole story is basically a tale of two Cambridges. On one side, you've got Cambridge in the UK, and on the other, Cambridge in the USA. Now, both were, and still are, huge powerhouses in economics. But they got into this massive intellectual battle over the very meaning of one simple word: capital. What's so fascinating here is that this was a genuine clash of the titans. From the UK, you had the challengers, thinkers like Joan Robinson, who were ready to question everything. And defending the established theory from MIT in the US, you had absolute giants like Paul Samuelson and Robert Solow. It was a real showdown.
So what exactly was this neoclassical theory that faced such a huge challenge? Well, before we get into the fight, let's first understand the simple idea that everything was built on.
At the heart of this theory was something called the aggregate production function. Now, it looks like a simple formula, Q equals F of KL. All this really means is that your total output, Q, depends on two things: your total labor, L, and your total capital, K. Think of it like baking a cake. Your output, the cake, depends on your effort, which is your labor, and all the ingredients and tools, which is your capital. But here's the most crucial part. The theory treated K, or capital, as a single, uniform, homogeneous thing. As if you could just lump together all different kinds of machines and just call it cap. This graph makes the theory even clearer. It shows that as you add more capital for each worker, that's the K on the bottom, the output per worker, the Q, also goes up. Makes sense, right? Give workers better tools, they produce more. But, and this is key, after a certain point, that growth starts to slow down. This is called diminishing returns, and this simple graph is a cornerstone of basic economics. Now, this model led to some pretty big conclusions. First, it suggested that when an economy has a lot of capital, the rate of profit, or R, tends to fall. You can see it right here in the graph. As K goes up, R goes down. A pretty straightforward relationship, or so it seemed. But for the workers, this was supposed to be great news. The theory also said that as capital per worker, K, increases, workers become more productive, and so their wages, W, go up. So the simple takeaway was, more capital is a good thing for labor.
So let's see how this all comes together. When you combine those last 2 points, you get a really clear inverse relationship between wages, W, and the profit rate, R. When one goes up, the other has to go down. It was a neat, tidy, and simple story that the neoclassical theory told. But then, this is where Joan Robinson from Cambridge, UK, enters the picture. She came forward with a critique that poked a massive hole in this whole neat and tidy story.
Her question was incredibly simple, but devastatingly profound. She just asked, but what is capital? That letter K that we've been throwing around so easily in the formula? What does it actually represent in the real world?
Her argument was that capital isn't just one thing. It's a whole bunch of different specific things. It's blast furnaces, machines, computers, even overcoats. How on earth can you just add a truck and a computer together? How do you mush them into a single quantity of capital? And that question opened up what's known as the measurement puzzle. Joan Robinson pointed to a fundamental logical problem here, something called circular reasoning. Let's break down exactly what that means.
Okay, so look. If you want to calculate the total amount of capital, K, you have to add up the value of all the different capital goods, the machines, the buildings, all of it. That makes sense, right? But to find the value of something, you first need to know its price.
And this slide gets to the very heart of the problem. Okay, step 1. The theory says that to figure out the rate of profit, you need to know the total value of capital. Got it. Step 2. To figure out the value of capital, you need to know the prices of all the different capital goods. Okay, but step 3, and this is the killer. In economics, the price of any capital good depends on the future profits you expect to get from it. This means to know the price, you already need to know the profit rate. Do you see the trap? You need the value of capital to find the profit rate, but you need the profit rate to find the value of capital. It's an endless loop. That's circular reasoning.
So you might be thinking, okay, this debate happened back in the 50s and 60s. Why does it still matter?
Well, the impact of this intellectual battle is still felt today. It left a really deep mark on the field of economics.
So what are the big takeaways from all of this? First, it totally challenged the core assumption that capital is just one single measurable thing. Second, it exposed that hidden logical flaw of circular reasoning right in the theory of distribution, and also showed that these simple, story-like models don't always apply so easily to our complex, real-world economies. And finally, it really influenced alternative schools of thought in economics like post-Keynesianism.
So we'll end this explainer with one last question for you to think about. If a core economic concept like capital can be this fragile and problematic, what else in economics should we be questioning?
Something to definitely chew on. Thanks for watching.